Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone that's on the call. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning. Good morning. I hope you are all well rested. Good morning. Morning, morning, morning. Good morning to everyone that joined us last week at our unconference. Why are the hands clapping? and and thumbs
Clapping
up.
from
I'm
last week.
confused. What is going on? Good morning to everyone. Thank you to everybody that joined us last week at our annual unconference, and thank you to everybody that joined us online. We hope that you guys had an epic time. We hope that you learned lots. We'll try to bring back some of those sessions in iTOOsdays for those of you that may have missed any. And if you've got any questions, if you've got any feedback, please go onto the app to give us the feedback. If you weren't present physically and you did not receive a link to the app, please do send us an email, or you can just drop us feedback here on the chat. But back to the business of today, we've got Paul Myson and Tladzeko on the call this morning, and they will be talking to us about the art of valuing art and demystifying valuation. So I just came in to say good morning. I will be back again at the end of this call to announce our winner. We had a little competition last week at the unconference, and we will be announcing who the winners were of that particular competition. But for now, I'm handing over to you, Zex and Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tove. Morning to everyone. My name is Ntlanza Zulu. I am the claims manager for art and collectibles, classic cars, drones, contingency products such as events, and also the crisis products such as your KNR and PVT. And welcome to today's iTOOsday. So our focus really will be on valuations, which are very critical in our space, and that really help us with ease of transaction when it comes to settling claims. In this discussion, Paul is going to sort of focus more on really the nitty-gritty of how do you come up with a valuation, a correct one for insurance. I am just going to give a brief background on the Cape Town Art Fair, which we attended in the middle of February. Just a little bit of some key lessons that we've learned there, and just a reminder of the type of product that we do provide. So let's start off with the key takeaways that we did have from the Cape Town Art Fair. Just confirming if my slide has next one. Nope. Still seeing the first slide, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Let's try this again. Can you just confirm you can see that slide, Paul?
We can, but it still has the design around it, so it's not a slideshow as yet.
Boy, oh boy. All right.
Do you want me to try and share from my side?
Please do. All right. So just to get started, so I myself am not an art connoisseur. That would better describe Paul. But as a person who can appreciate art and as an insurer, there are a few things that we did learn as we attended the Cape Town Art Fair. And these key takeaways really are embodied in this slide. First of all, just to give a few interesting stats about what happened at this Cape Town Art Fair. There were about 126 exhibitors in the convention center there in Cape Town. 42 of those 126 were actually making their debut appearance. And now this tells us that the art market is very much open to the global market also. And there's definitely growth, and there's definitely a lot of businesses which are seeing potential in the art market. Of these 126 exhibitors, they actually came from about 34 global cities, and they showcased about 100 or 490 artists. All of these artists from all over the world. In terms of foot traffic that was seen at the Cape Town Art Fair, there was just over 34,000 of visitors. A large number of these visitors, and I can testify that myself, were a lot of international visitors. So really, this is the biggest art event that happens under the African sun, but there's clearly a lot of potential still in this market, and there's a lot of growth. What you do see in this photo, uh, in the first photo that we have here, it's a photo of an artist called Jake Aikman. So I took this photo, not knowing that I'll put this on a presentation, but just aesthetically, it looked great. Here we have two photos which actually show the same thing. One really is ruggedy, rough, but the other one is clear. If you've ever gotten the opportunity to actually see one of these Jake Aikman artworks, you would swear that it is a clear photograph. It looks so clear from different angles, but as you get closer, you actually get to see and appreciate that this is actually a work of art. But the picture on the right and on the left is actually the same representation of the picture. But what this does teach us, and this is the first key takeaway, in the market that we do have, the market sentiment and demand has become much more stable than what it has been in a previous year. So we did have a few disruptions that did come in the market where we had speculative booms. You would remember there was a boom of NFTs. However, we've seen the resilience that does come with the physical art market and being physical and present to actually see the artwork and engage with the artist and that. The type of buyers that we have in the market are more deliberate than they have been. They show interest in quality, in beauty, in long term over something that could be hyped up via different sorts of media. This is the first key takeaway. While there's a lot of murky stuff that does change the market, the art market has continued to remain quite stable and quite clear. The second key takeaway that we have is that we are clearly seeing a growth in the focus in African art. So what a Cape Town Art Fair does for the art market in Africa is that it becomes a gateway for all these international guests, collectors to actually come and engage with the African contemporary art. We've seen a lot of contemporary African artworks and African artists get more recognition overseas. More and more, we're getting to see a lot of overseas galleries adopt African artists. So for example, as this picture is by Jake Aikman. Jake Aikman is actually a South African contemporary painter, and he's best known for these beautiful works that he does. However, the primary gallery that he uses that sends out his work is actually a gallery all the way in Barcelona, Spain, called Suburbia Contemporary. This just shows the hunger that is there for more African contemporary works and artists to be showcased in the global space. The third key takeaway is that art has become more accessible. How it used to work back then, you had well-established artists with high-end collectors. However, that has gradually changed. It's sort of an unblurring from the one picture to the other picture for both creators in the art market and also the buyers. For example, what we did see in this Cape Town Art Fair, the city of Cape Town showcased a few of upcoming artists who they have enrolled in a program and a workshop initiative that they have taken. This exposure for these artists is a lifetime present that no one else could give them. The amount of exposure that they got to an international market is something that many artists in their lifetime would never actually get to achieve. So this inclusion of these younger artists, not well-known artists, but getting the opportunity to actually showcase their work, not only helps them as creators, but also us as buyers. So for us as mere mortals who need to muster up the courage all the time to go look at the small white paper next to the artwork to check how much it is, we actually do think that one day could be today because more and more of this artwork has become accessible and easy to buy. Again, through different types of medias like social media, it's easy now to fast track a new generation of collectors and buyers. Younger people prefer looking at things for a longer time, thinking about what they'll purchase. That also does allow the accessibility of art for both buyers and creators. Then the fourth takeaway, and the last one that I'll speak about, is there is a heightened awareness in education when it does come to the art market itself. Such fairs are a gateway to the global market, but again, it exposes collectors and galleries to a different type of exposure. So, for example, there's an exposure of transit, handling, and having these exhibitions come up. That's why we have iTOO Art and Show, who are able then to provide the security to make these things happen. While a lot of in the African space, there's still a lot of growth that could still happen, but these risks still remain, and you need an iTOO partner like us to be able to unlock these opportunities, especially in untouched territories. So basically what the slide is about is how in the past, a lot of things were blurry. A lot of things were sort of out of touch for the normal person. But the picture has become clearer. There's definitely a clearer picture for the African market. There's a clearer picture for us aspiring collectors. All of this just proves that this market, the art market, is here and it's here to stay for a long time. But now I'd like to discuss why people collect. Why do people collect? And this is the next slide. Now, my manager here at iTOO tends to ask when he looks at some of the claims that we do have and the pictures of the artworks, he says, who would buy this artsy fartsy thing? And really, I cannot answer him when he asks this because really a lot of it is subjective. But there's three main reasons why people actually do collect artworks. And there's quite more, but I think it's easier to group them into these three. The first is that this is an investment capital. Art has become a strategic asset that can be used to provide diversification when it comes to capital portfolio risks. And the risks are quite low compared to the normal markets where one could invest. For example, the advantages of this is that there's really a low correlation between what happens in the financial markets and what could independently happen at prices of artworks. So art is not prone to the market volatility. So Trump could open his mouth, wide and be red in the face. The art market is not going to flinch. It does make this a safe haven where there's less volatility. Again, there's other benefits. For example, When it comes to capital gains would only be taxed if you dispose of the artwork or you sell the artwork. So this is great for estate planning, wealth transfer, and using these as a security. Obviously, at the same time, there's also disadvantages that could be there. Art is not a liquid asset, so it might take some time, and really timing is everything in the art market. So holding on to these precious artworks until the right time, depending also on the reason why you have invested in them, is something that needs food for thought. So the first reason why a lot of people collect is because this is an investment for their capital. But two, and this is a big part also, is that a lot of people collect because this is their passion. Aesthetically, art looks very good. You do have the odd cases here and there of people who you don't really want to know what's going on in their brains, but the vast majority looks good. So this is where you get high-end interior designers who, when they showcase their products, actually use a lot of art as part of that portfolio. Some collectors just simply enjoy surrounding themselves with beauty, something that looks nice, something that they can continue looking at. And then, oh, I might have scared the dogs with that. The other reason where, or the other reason people collect under passion would be a personal identity. So art is a form of storytelling. So it reflects who you are, your journey, your values, and how you see the world. So many people fall in love with a piece because it makes them feel something, joy, nostalgia, some sort of curiosity, and it is sort of a representation of themselves. And thus they are drawn to it and then start collecting these. So a lot of collectors, you'd look at their collection, will tell you actually a story about what has been happening in their life. But also under passion, there's another sector, which is culture and heritage. A lot of people try to embody the culture and heritage that they have in the artwork. So a lot of these captured moments are actually moments in history which sort of also fill in missing pieces that we might have in our history. A few collectors have called themselves philanthropists. Reason being, the reason why they collect is to make sure that they keep and preserve a culture and a heritage. They're also contributing to an ecosystem where artists are able to continue living and supporting themselves. But at the same time, we keep this rich history that is able to fill in the missing pieces in a lot of history. While history has been documented in a lot of books, the art world is able to make something out of history, and sculptures, paintings sort of tell a better story about that history. So this passion drives people to look at things and enjoy what they're looking at, find some sort of personal identity, and make them feel good about themselves as they continue keeping a heritage and a culture of things. So that also drives people to then do this collection. But the last reason, which is more of the obvious reason why people do collect, is basically a social status. It's collecting art is a status symbol, an expression of power, identity, social rank, prestige, you name it. And these are the reasons why people would collect. With this in mind, the type of people who collect, what they're collecting, and how what they're collecting actually has a lot of sentimental value more than actual monetary value, makes us ask ourselves, do we then have the right insurance product to cater for that? And this will be my last slide. What the iTOO Art Insure policy would cover in light of the actual type of people who actually do collect. Why should you take the i2 Art and Shaw policy? And the answer is simple. It is built for purpose. It is built with the very thought in mind of who collectors are and what they're looking for, and then the ecosystem that then surrounds them, so the whole market itself. So, for example, I'm just going to point out a few things which are found on the policy, which you won't find on a normal policy that would cover any types of assets. For example, the Art and Show policy would cover protecting your collection. This benefit of the policy actually provides proactive action to preserve one's collection. So no amount of money can actually replace sentimental value. And when an insured sees that there's imminent danger towards their collection, they could simply give their broker a call, and then we would arrange the removal of that artwork and safekeeping of it until it is safe again to get it back. This comes at no extra charge. There's also the appreciation in value. Art is an appreciating asset. And the policy understands that there's market conditions that could affect the value of these precious arts, and thus responds accordingly. There are times where there could be something that happens in the market that causes an appreciation in the actual value of the artist or certain types of works. And what our policy would do is that if you do have a valuation that is not older than 2 years that you've provided us and insured on, the policy would then cover whatever the appreciation of that asset would be. Depreciation is another thing that our policy has, depreciation in value, and this is especially important, and we'll discuss this later on with Paul. When a claim happens and we have your artwork restored, sometimes what could happen is that it could lose its value. Now, our policy would then respond to any loss of value that has happened after a claim and the artwork has been restored. There's also a benefit for newly bought artworks, which allows you a 30-day period where you've purchased an artwork but have not put it on cover as yet. We will cover that artwork at no charge at all for those 30 days. A death of an artist could be a market disruption. And what could happen is that this could change the market's perspective of that artwork, of that artist. What could happen is that naturally, after an artist dies, because you will never get any more works out of that artist, the works that he has already then become more precious, and that could easily cause an increase in value. So our policy would cover up to 150% increase in value for a specific artwork if the artist dies. And the last thing is pairs and sets. Now, under a normal policy, if something that is part of a pair and set or a set, you would also pay for the entire set if something were to happen. And that's what our policy would do. If there's damage to the one part, we would pay the claim for the entire set. So if it's a 9-piece and only one piece is damaged, we would pay the value of that full set, even though the majority itself remains undamaged. And something that our policy then does is then the insured does have the option to retain the salvage if they wish to do so, and then we do negotiate on settlement on that. So these are really just the few things that our insurance policy, which was built and made for collectors, is able to respond to the market conditions and to what the market requires. I think my final say would be, as you can see on the screen, the only reason you should trust i2 with your artworks and your clients' artworks is because we love sketchy risks. So anytime you do have a policy, or you do need help on a policy and underwriting that policy, we do have experts in our team who will try to find a way to make sure that we can provide the right cover for your client. With that said, I'd like to hand over to Paul Myson. Paul will give a bit of details on his background, and this just in line with our theme of our unconference last week, which was partnerships. Having partnerships with experts in the industry does help us to provide a better service and a better understanding of what we're doing. And this session is actually aimed at that, providing our broker market and our clients with enough information so that the right decision can be made, and understanding why those decisions should be made in such a way. So I'll hand over to Paul and he will continue.
Fanzako, thank you very much, and thank you very much to iTOO for the opportunity to have this discussion. I think it's quite important to understand the differences of values and etc., but I'll get into that in a moment. Just a bit about myself. I am a fellow of the Royal Society for the Advancements of Arts, Manufacturing and Commerce. I'm also a fellow of the International Fine Art and Antiques Appraisers Association, as well as the only accredited member of the International Society of Appraisers, specializing in fine art and antiques in Africa, actually. So I'm very fortunate to have those qualifications. Can we move to the next slide, please? So first of all, we need to understand the fundamentals of insurance. You know, what is the purpose of actually having insurance? And that is quite simply is to make the client whole again after having a loss. So if a work is damaged, to restoring it back to its condition if it's possible. If not, is to compensate them financially for the loss of that work of art or antique, etc. And in doing so, most insurance policies require that a valuation is undertaken on inception of the policy, so that the insured has an understanding of what it is that they're covering, the nature of what it is that they're covering, and in some cases agreed values as to what is being covered. But what I'm going to really focus on today is understanding the difference between what is classified as value and what is its cost. Because often we turn around and say, well, you know, what is its value? Well, when we come as a professional appraiser, value is always assigned to an object when we're looking at if you're going to monetarily, if you're going to sell it. What is its market value? When we're talking about insurance, we're looking at replacement cost. What is it going to cost to replace the said asset if it is lost? And we need to look at the different markets in terms of that, which I'll get into our next slide and go into a little bit further detail. Insurance reporting is very important to understand that when it comes to reporting on an insurance policy, we have to, as appraisers, we have to adhere to international valuation standards, which are laid down by the International Valuation Standard Council. And they have, every year they issue their standards, which is this year is 397 pages to cover what it is that we as appraisers have to do in terms of our methodologies, our reporting, how we report, all the documents that we need to keep in our possessions for a minimum of 5 years after undertaking evaluation, which is what we classify as our workbook, so that if there's ever a loss and there's a dispute over a loss, we have all the financial documentation to support our values. So we as appraisers, we cannot give opinion of value. We have to base our values on clear statistics and understanding that it is very important that we have our data to back it up. Because we do not want to be able to be sitting before a judge and actually saying, well, I thought it was worth this much. We need to prove it with the correct data to support our values. So we can move on to the next slide. So, what is the purpose of insurance? To provide financial protection against unexpected losses, to transfer the risk from an individual or business to the insurer, to restore financial position after loss or damage, and to provide peace of mind and business continuity going forward. And very importantly, to comply with legal or contractual requirements of the insurance policy. So that's basically the purpose of insurance. If we can move on to the next slide. Now, value versus replacement cost. This is something I find very important that we all understand. When it comes to value, we discuss market value or market related value. These are terms under international valuation standards that always refer to an asset, what it is likely to sell for in the open market. This is the secondary market, not in the primary market. So the primary market is galleries or at the art fair, etc. That is the primary market where you're buying it from a dealer or directly from the artists themselves. And those are what we would classify as the cost of replacing. Market value is the secondary market, so auction houses or through secondary galleries that are not contracted to the artists themselves. And this is very important because it's influenced by supply and demand and depreciation. But more importantly, when it comes to market value, the market value is for a set period of time. So if an item goes onto an auction, it normally goes on display for a few weeks. Please excuse my rooster in the background there. Anytime you look at it, it is, he's totally lost my train of thought, a silly bird. When we look at auction, we're looking at a very short period of time that the item is going to be displayed and marketed, and it all depends on who it is that attends that auction on that day. And that is what will then be guiding how much the work actually fetches. Unlike through the primary market where it is then placed on display, numerous occasions it's months that it is on display, and the work is then not set to a set moment in time when it has to be sold. Excuse me just 1 second. Sorry, we're going to go and give him some oats to keep him quiet. So that is the difference between the primary market and the secondary market. So when we as appraisers are called in to do a valuation for an insurance company or for the collector themselves, we have to look at the primary market where we look for the works of art that are being sold. That in some cases cannot be the case with some of our old masters, but that in itself is not always the case, because auction houses, a lot of the time, they're the ones who put forward a great deal of budget into marketing exactly what it is that they're placing into the market, and also advertising the fact that they are pushing and creating a market for old masters, etc. That is not correct. When it comes to turnover in terms of the market, the auction houses like to say, well, we turned over 200-300 million rands worth of art this year. In the larger scope of things, the primary market, the galleries, turn over far in excess of that, far in excess. Private deals that are done between collectors and sellers through brokers of works of art, that in their case is a fraction. The auction is a fraction of what is actually sold privately within the market. And the reason being is that a lot of the top-end collectors, when they purchase a work to fill a gap in their collection, they may have a lesser work by the same artist which they'll want to dispose of. A lot of the time, the collectors are of such that they have a very private nature and do not want people to know that they are disposing of a certain work of art in their collection. So to be rehomed privately through a broker to another collector who has a gap in their collection. So that gets done in a great deal in the background. So it's not always through an auction house. So one needs to understand replacement cost is what it is that we use when we are doing a valuation. If we can move to the next slide. Now, more importantly, does geographical location affect replacement cost? Yes, it does. because depending on what the object is, I put down here differences in labor costs in regions. So if we're looking at replacing antique furniture, or if we're looking at sort of high-end furniture, such as Pierre Cronier's furniture, which is reproductions of earlier pieces. If you're in Johannesburg and you need to replace it, it's going to cost different to what it is going to cost based in Cape Town. If we're looking at international works of art, for example, our currency fluctuations make a very big difference in works of art that needs to be purchased outside the country to replace a work that is lost here. I have clients who have to do their valuations annually purely because a 1 or 2% fluctuation in the currency fluctuation can affect the value of their collections by a few hundred million rand. So it all depends on the fluctuation in currency, etc., etc. If we can move to the next slide, it gives us a better understanding. I've used something here which is a very simple object. So if we look at a sofa manufactured by Sofa Works here in South Africa, retail is 22,800, delivered to you in your suburban home in Sandton. Now, next slide. Say we had that couch and we're sitting in the middle of the Okavango Delta in a lodge. Would that then have the same replacement cost? No, it would not, because that replacement cost needs to be on hanger or in situ. So what is it going to cost to replace that if it is lost in its geographical location? So that sofa, which costs 22,800 in Sandton, would now require transportation costs of 8,400 rand, the insurance costs on that as well of 1,480, thus increasing the replacement cost in situ to 32,680 rand. The same would occur. So if we look at somebody like Andrew Warhol, one of his prints, if it's lost here in South Africa, we're not going to find the exact work available here in South Africa. So we'd have to look internationally to find a work to replace it. With that comes the cost implications. So it's purchased at auction. The hammer price is $10,000, but then one has to take into consideration, especially internationally, normally between 30 to 35% buyer's premium with VAT applicable on that, which then takes it over $13,000. Then it needs to be brought to South Africa. Shipping is normally 3% of the value, as well as insurance at 3% of the value. And then we have the challenge of customs duties, depending on the period of the work and the artwork. Is it a print? Has it got South African interest, etc.? Will all depend on which tax bracket it will fall into for the customs duties. Hence pushing up the price. So it was originally $10,000, but landed in South Africa, we're looking close to $17,000 for the replacement cost of the work. So all of this is very important to understand, that when we're doing the valuation, we are doing a valuation to make the client whole again, and giving an opinion of value where we say, well, we think it's between 20 and 30,000 rand. So we go at 25,000 rand coverage, would not work because it doesn't cover the fact of all the extra incrementals that one has to take into consideration when making the client whole again. If we can move to the next slide. So they're very important to have a correct valuation schedule and report. To ensure the adequate insurance coverage is the most important thing. To prevent underinsurance and then having an average clause penalties, which is also very important. There's nothing worse that a client wants to see, is that they're having averages placed on their policy when they've entrusted a professional to undertake a valuation for them. Very importantly is to support accurate premium collection, because without the correct premium, the person is not getting the correct cover. But more important, the insurer and the underwriters are not getting the correct premium for the collection that's being underwritten. Which, an area where I come into quite a bit, is facilitating smoother and faster claims processing. So if we have a valuation and we've got the supporting data to support that valuation, and the premiums have been paid on that valuation, it becomes a lot smoother and faster claims process, because it has been an agreed value. We have got the documentation to prove the value that is present on that valuation schedule, and allows for a quick and smooth transaction for both the insurer and the insured. When we do undertake a valuation, we normally do it with visual references to the works of art. So you have a photograph of the work as well as a description of the work of art. And if possible, if we have access to provenance, etc., we stipulate that down on the valuation schedule together with the valuation figure. Now, when we undertake, well, when I undertake and my team undertakes a valuation, our preamble for the valuation is normally in the region of 15 to 18 pages. And the reason why we have such a large preamble is to understand what was the purpose of the valuation. And this is why we cover it in there, saying we are undertaking the valuation for insurance purposes. What market are we using for this? We are using the primary market, the retail market, in terms of using our data to support our valuations. The date of valuation needs to be on the valuation schedule, as well as who can use the report. Now, this is very important because in some cases we found clients using our valuation reports for insurance reporting purposes and then going to their banks and saying, well, this is what my art collection is worth. Can we get a loan against the collection? And then they try and use our valuations as supporting data. Well, that is not, first of all, it cannot be used because it stipulates in our preamble it can only be used for reporting standards, for insurance reporting. And that's very important because if you're going to the bank and asking for a loan, you're going to look at what the market value is, because if you default on your payments and they need to foreclose on you, they need to be able to sell the collection to recoup their losses. So hence the two different areas in terms of value. Market value being what it's likely to sell for, and the replacement cost, which is going to be considerably more. And then, of course, the dispute between the insurer and the insured is very important. Having a correct valuation report irons out all of those areas, those sort of grey areas. If we can move to the next schedule, please. Impacts. Recently we had a claim where it was due to flood damage. In terms of the claim, I too has been dealing with it, and I was asked to come forward and actually just give some advice on some of the works. Unfortunately, in this case, it was an agreed value. The client had agreed to the values. There was indeed a valuation that was undertaken, but in this case, the value was taken at market value and not at replacement cost, which creates a problem when one comes into what is called loss of value. So quite a few of the works had incurred water damage. Some had incurred a little bit of damage in the process of removing the works from frames, as well as, I believe, historical value and historical condition issues such as foxing, etc. But once the object has been conserved by a professional conservator, one has to then look at, has the work itself depreciated in value? And this becomes very difficult when the value in terms of how it was valued in the first place, and then how we have to work out the loss of value. If it's not done correctly, it makes it very difficult to do so. So then in this case, some of them were by international works of art, where they'd given a market value rather than replacement cost. And when it came to the diminution of value, the loss of value, it becomes very difficult to work out a monetary thing, so we had to work it out in percentage. What is the percentage loss in terms of what it was originally insured for? And this becomes quite problematic because the client then goes and sees, goes and does some research online and to see what these are selling for in the primary market, and then realizes that his collection is severely underinsured because a work that was agreed to value at like 90,000 Rand, he can't find another example in the primary market for less than 20,000 pounds. So it creates an area of dispute, which if it had been valued correctly first time round, it wouldn't have happened, and the client wouldn't have had felt like he'd been aggrieved in any manner. Understanding also when it comes to even right way down to simple things such as framing. A lot of the time artists, when they frame their works, they have a particular frame in mind that will accentuate or visually display the work in a way that they had conceptualized it to be. So some cases, if the frame is too large, it detracts from the work itself. So they put a thin, very simple frame around the work, so the picture speaks for itself. And when replacing, one has to do like for like, so that the framing itself doesn't distract from the work, and is of the same quality that it was originally framed in. If we could move to the next slide. Ooh, I see there was a slide, a little one missing. I wonder, can I share from my side the one slide that I'd really wanted to show? Let me go here. Can we all see that?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
we can.
Yes, we can.
Oops. Let me quickly pop down here to this one. This is the one in particular I wanted to show you. Let me minimize that. I particularly want to show this because Susanna Helen Gathway is a contemporary artist whose works sell through Goodman Gallery and the Print Gallery, etc. And this is a prime example of a work that has recently, the difference between the primary market and the secondary market. On the left-hand side is John Coltrane lithograph. Admittedly, this is a 3-color lithograph and it's a recent pressing of 2021, which had been slightly enlarged, etc. But you can see its retail price, asking price of the Goodman Gallery for this particular print is 48,000 Rand. There are 2 works that sold recently in 2023. And if you look at the dates, the one on the right sold on the 29th of March through Stefan Welz & Co. in Johannesburg. Unfortunately, with art price, everything's in dollars or euros, etc. But this equated to an equivalent of $497 it sold for. Admittedly, it was an early printing of the work of 2011. But a day later, they had the exact same print, same edition, just a little bit further down. So the edition, I think, was of 40. The one on the right was 17, and the other one on the left was 22. And it didn't sell. A day apart, didn't sell. Which shows you that there was not a great deal of interest. But where does your value then lie in terms of looking at these things? And when we come to
Hi, everyone. Just checking in if you can all still hear Paul.
Nope, seems like he's...
Okay.
Nope.
It seems that we have lost Paul. We'll try to get him on the call, back on the call. He's frozen on our side as well. But while we wait for Paul, if he does not come back in the next 2 seconds, we will quickly do the lucky draw. Zex, if you will allow me, unless if you want to jump in.
No, you can do the lucky draw while we get him back
All
in.
back on. Okay, cool. So last week Thursday we ran a competition. We had an activation, and we've got 5 prizes to give away. But today we're only going to give 1 out, and we will give 2 out next week to everybody that attends and that participated in that lucky draw. And this week's winner, can I get a drum roll, Zex?
I'm not sure if that.
We can't hear your drum roll. So this week's winner is Refilwe Nyati from Willis Towers Watson. Is Refilwe on the call? I think if Refilwe is on the call, congratulations, Refilwe. We will send your prize out to you. It is a iTOO goodie bag that has got 2 of the books that we showcased last week at the unconference. Congratulations, Refilwe. And there's still a chance to win for anybody that entered that competition last week. And I just wanted to remind everybody that as we draw closer to the end of the CPD cycle in May, don't be the one who's caught rushing for CPD points. You will earn one CPD hour for attending today, but we also have released our 4th edition of The Expert, which is our publication. It's got a whole host of articles covering topics such as renewable energy, trade credit. We're also covering AI and cyber. Apologize for that light. The articles carry 4 CPD hours. I will put the link on the chat for anybody who wants to go through and read our magazine and take that CPD test. It is available on our website. If you ever forget, just go to our website, go to the hub, and you will find the CPD articles there. I see Paul isn't back on, Zex. Can I hand back over
It's
to
either the
you?
rooster or the dogs are sabotaging him. They've probably eaten the cables.
I think it's both. Somebody let the dogs out and the roosters went mad.
But
Cool.
yeah, he was sort of closing in on his presentation, and mainly the big message that we actually wanted to send through is really there's a lot of forethought that goes into having the right valuations. It's not really a thumb-sucking exercise, but there's a bigger impact. So you'll notice when those who have interacted with our underwriters before, you'd normally get a renewal and then there's something written down there in big bold. If you don't have a valuation that's not older than 2 years, encourage your client to get that. And that's simply there just to make sure that the policy responds the way it should and gives the insured the full benefit and peace of mind. Again, if you don't have a valuation that's older than a valuation not older than 2 years, then you're able to unlock those benefits of when there's an appreciation in value, when things do depreciate. But the big lesson is we need to educate our clients, not just take any valuation from anywhere. In the claim that Paul was referring to, they had received a valuation, but it was for a different purpose. It wasn't for insurance purpose. And the client had agreed to then insure it at that value. So our policy does say that we will agree the value that you want us to insure it, as long as you can back it up with some sort of documentation and valuation. And because the purpose of that valuation that they had was not for replacement or for insurance purpose, the unfortunate thing is that this insured, though they had been collecting for plus 20 years, they couldn't really unlock the true value of their collection come claim stage. So the big lesson is because it was a tough conversation to have with the client and sit to the client and explain this along with the broker, how they have underinsured. But if we start the process correctly by getting the right people into the room, having a person like Paul come and evaluate your art is relatively cheap compared to the losses that you could incur if this is not done correctly. So big lesson, that was learned. However, the client was able to at least retain their artwork. It was restored. It's just that that loss of value was not realized because of underinsurance. That is all from me today. I'm not sure. We do have about 3 minutes, which we could open up for any questions. Let me see if there's something in the Q&A. All right, so we do have a question from Irene regarding what's the average cost for an evaluation. So we have a panel of valuators that we could give you access to. These are across the country, and what you'll find is that these valuators all specialize in something. So, for example, the reason why we had to bring Paul in for this specific evaluation was because he has expertise, especially in international works. So you do have different valuators who specialize in different, I'd say, sectors or different types of products. On average, we have also agreed terms with some of these valuators. For example, one valuation for one artwork could cost about 250 Rand, but depending on how large your collection is, it then can be negotiated with the valuator. So, for example, and there's other costs. So, for example, Paul is all the way down in Cape Town. If he has to fly, then he has to consider all of those costs. But normal valuation ranges between 250 to 300. If you have a bigger collection, that could sort of scale down to 150 at times, just depending on how big that scale is. Hope that answers your question. Let's see if we have any other questions. Okay, another one from Irene. One of my clients is an artist, and although she is not selling commercially, her house is full of beautiful paintings. Of course, these paintings has a monetary value if you think of the cost of the canvas and print. How can she go about valuating her pieces? All right. I see Paul's hand is back. Paul,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Sorry. Sorry about
This-
that. I don't know what happened there. I had to log it back in. It just froze.
Yeah, we were suspecting that maybe the rooster is the one.
Yeah, I think
Didn't
he's
eat
been
the
gnawing
oats,
at
it ate
my
the cake.
cables.
So maybe
Thank-
you can take
I'll
this
happily
question.
answer that, because often we get called into a situation where we have to do valuations of works of art that there is no proven track record for that artist. I find that a lot with I do a lot of GRAP 103 valuations, which is for museums, etc. And a lot of the time with Ruth Prowse and institutions of that nature, they're students. So their works are really good quality, but their students and never became commercially successful. So in those situations, we then look into the market for works that are of comparable quality. So work similar sort of size, similar sort of period, similar sort of quality in terms of aesthetic. And we can then use that as a comparable for that particular artist. Not saying that it's likely to fetch that if it comes into the open market, because as artists all know, it takes time to develop a market for themselves. It's marketing, it's the way that they present themselves within the market, etc. But in terms of ensuring it, the methodology that we use is using a comparable artist with similar sort of quality, similar sort of aesthetic, similar sort of period, and that we would then use a comparable to ensure a work.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I see we have unfortunately run out of time. But thank you very much, Paul, for your
It's been
time.
my real pleasure, and thank you very much.
Looking forward to continuing to work together. And thank you to all our brokers. Thank you for logging in. Hope you enjoyed the session. We'll be back here again next week with further iTOOsdays. If you do have any questions for us, you can drop them all in the chat, and then we'll try to answer them one by one. I do see a note from Tove regarding to next week's iTOOsday.
Yes, I just wanted to let everybody know, I know we were a minute over, that last week, Thursday, we launched our newest product here at iTOO. It's called AI Sure, which is an AI insurance product. So for anybody that missed that last week, or if you would like to join and find out some more, the next iTOOsday will be based on the new product, AI Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and enjoy your Tuesday, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Lex.